just 4 hours, Malaysia had secured majority control of Guthrie, reclaiming 200,000 acres of Malaysian land, millions in future profits, and the power to control their own destiny. The British media was stunned.
When we offered to buy, they were not willing to sell. They want to retain. So we had to go to the market to see whether we can acquire the companies or not.
Margaret Thatcher's government was blindsided, and Guthrie's chairman? He didn't hear the news from his executives. He heard it on the radio. This was the 4 hours that changed everything. Malaysia's 1981 dawn raid on the British Empire.
Game over.
Nobody believed they could do it. Not the British government, not the global financial elite, not even some of their own people. Because who would dare challenge the British Empire? The masters of global finance. On their own turf? But on the morning of September 7th, 1981, a small team from Malaysia, led by Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, did exactly that. In just 4 hours, they pulled off one of the boldest financial takeovers in modern history. The 1981 dawn raid on the London Stock Exchange. A move so fast, so ruthless, so perfectly executed. But by the time Margaret Thatcher's Britain even realized what had happened, Malaysia had already won. This is the untold story of how a rising nation outsmarted an empire, took back control of its wealth, and forever changed the course of its economy. Chapter 1. How Britain controlled Malaysia's wealth for over a century. For more than 100 years, Malaysia, then known as Malaya, was one of Britain's most valuable colonies, not because of gold, not because of oil, but because of rubber. By the mid-20th century, Malaysia was producing over half of the world's rubber supply, a critical resource that powered everything, from cars and factories to war machines and global industries. But there was a catch. The profits didn't stay in Malaysia. British corporations, like Guthrie Corporation, owned millions of acres of Malaysia's richest plantation land. Land worked by Malaysians, but controlled by London boardrooms. While the UK economy boomed, Malaysia remained trapped in poverty, watching its own resources drained away, to fuel someone else's prosperity. By the time Malaysia gained independence in 1957, not much had changed. Foreign companies still dominated the economy. Local ownership was almost non-existent, and Malaysia's future was still tied to British interests. But in 1981, a new leader came to power, Mahathir Mohamad, and he wasn't here to ask for Malaysia's wealth back. He was here to take it. Chapter 2. Who is Mahathir Mohamad? Who was this man brave enough to take on the British Empire? He is not a corporate tycoon. He is not a military general. He is not a product of Malaysia's elite ruling class. He was Mahathir Mohamad, the son of a school teacher, a medical doctor from a small town called Alor Setar, and a man who had spent his entire life fighting for Malaysia's future. While earlier leaders tried to cooperate with former colonial powers, Mahathir believed Malaysia had waited long enough. He didn't just see foreign ownership as a policy failure. He saw it as a national disease. And Mahathir wasn't the kind of leader to treat symptoms. He was the kind of leader who performed surgery. Unlike the political elite who filled their schedules with golf games, exclusive clubs, and expensive parties. Mahathir didn't play golf. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He lived disciplined, worked tirelessly, and made it his life's mission to see Malaysia rise as a true economic power. When Mahathir looked at companies like Guthrie, he didn't just see land or profits. He saw stolen potential. Millions of acres of Malaysian land, worked by Malaysians, but owned and controlled by boardrooms in London. He knew political speeches wouldn't fix it. He knew negotiations wouldn't cut it. So, in his first months as Prime Minister, Mahathir made a quiet but radical decision. Malaysia would take it back. But even Mahathir knew he couldn't pull it off alone. And that's where his inner circle of financial warriors, the architects of the Dawn Raid, entered the story. Chapter 3. The Mastermind and Architects of Dawn Raid, 1981. The final insult came in 1981. Guthrie Corporation, the British giant controlling millions of acres of Malaysian land, began secretly selling off those assets to foreign buyers without even telling Malaysia. At the time, PNB, Malaysia's national investment arm, already owned 25% of Guthrie's shares. But Guthrie's board didn't even notify them. They treated Malaysia like an outsider in its own economy. That was it. Mahathir had had enough. In his own words, the future of 18 million Malaysians is on the line, and waiting any longer could be catastrophic. But Mahathir knew there was a right way to fight back. He didn't want to nationalize Guthrie by force. That could scare off foreign investors and send the wrong message to global markets. Instead, he decided to beat the British at their own game, using capitalism itself as his weapon. And that's when he turned to Malaysia's sharpest financial minds. The architects of the Dawn Raid. At the center was Tun Ismail Muhammad Ali, former governor of Bank Negara Malaysia, and chairman of PNB at the time. The agency tasked with returning Malaysia's wealth to its people. He passed away in 1998, but his legacy still shapes Malaysia's economy today. Supporting him was Tan Sri Abdul Khalid Ibrahim, the CEO of PNB, who would later go on to lead Guthrie itself and serve as Chief Minister of Selangor. He passed away in 2022, but his role in this mission remains legendary. Backing them politically was Tengku Razaleigh Hamzah, Malaysia's Minister of Finance, who ensured the operation had full government support. As of 2025, he remains one of Malaysia's most respected elder statesmen. And in the background, Tun Raja Moha Raja Badio Zaman, Malaysia's senior economic strategist, crafted the legal and financial blueprint. That made the raid bulletproof. He passed away in 2003, but his contributions are still remembered in Malaysia's economic history. But even with this dream team, there was one massive challenge: money. The team needed 1 billion ringgit, around 350 million US dollars at the time, or nearly $1 billion in today's money. Malaysia's banks were hesitant, investors were nervous. An OCBC bank in Singapore flat out refused to help, nearly collapsing the entire mission. Desperate to keep the dream alive, Malaysia's team reached out to the Kuwait Investment Office, securing emergency funding at the 11th hour. With Petronas providing additional firepower and Rothschild and Company advising in London, the plan was back on track. On the morning of September 7th, 1981, before London had even opened for business, Malaysia made its move. By the way, if you are Malaysian, comment below, Malaysian here. Chapter 4. The execution of the Dawn Raid. It was called the Dawn Raid for one simple reason: it had to be finished before London woke up. On the morning of September 7th, 1981, while Britain slept, Malaysia's team made their move. Working with Rothschild and Company and financial brokers like Rowe and Pittman, Malaysia's secret network began quietly buying Guthrie shares across Singapore, Hong Kong, and other global markets. The mission? Secure 51% control of Guthrie before the London Stock Exchange even opened, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Billions of Malaysian ringgit were on the line. Malaysia's economic future was on the line. If this mission failed, Malaysia risked staying trapped as an economic colony for another century. One mistimed trade, one leak to the British press, and the entire operation would collapse, taking Malaysia's financial credibility down with it. And remember, this was 1981. There was no WhatsApp, no instant messaging, no mobile phones. Everything had to be synchronized manually, through landlines, faxes, and in-person meetings. Yet somehow, Malaysia's team stayed laser-focused. They used multiple buying channels to mask their movements, making it impossible to detect who was behind the raid. But just when it seemed everything was going to plan, disaster struck. OCBC Bank in Singapore, a critical partner in the mission, refused to release their shares. Without those shares, Malaysia wouldn't reach the critical 51%. And the entire mission, Malaysia's shot at economic freedom, was about to fall apart. Desperate to save the operation, Malaysia's team turned to the Kuwait Investment Office, who came through at the 11th hour with emergency capital to keep the raid alive. By the time the London Stock Exchange opened, Malaysia had done the unthinkable. In just 4 hours, Malaysia had secured majority control of Guthrie, reclaiming 200,000 acres of Malaysian land, millions in future profits, and the power to control their own destiny. The British media was stunned. Margaret Thatcher's government was blindsided. And Guthrie's chairman? He didn't hear the news from his executives. He heard it on the radio. By the time London understood what had happened, it was already over. Malaysia had won. The news sent shockwaves around the globe. Newspapers across the world reported on the unprecedented move. The New Straits Times in Malaysia headlined, "Bringing Guthrie Back Home." The Financial Times in the UK described it as backdoor nationalisation. The Times of London called it a surprise assault on British economic interests. The Wall Street Journal highlighted the raid as a bold move by a developing nation to reclaim its assets. Segment 5. Britain's retaliation and Mahathir's response. While Malaysians celebrated the victory, Britain wasn't done yet. Margaret Thatcher's government had been publicly humiliated. Global headlines declared it a former colony outsmarts the British Empire, and so the retaliation began. Malaysia's students paid the price. At the time, over 17,000 Malaysian students were studying in the UK. Families had sacrificed everything to send their children to British universities: Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, London School of Economics. But just weeks after the raid, Britain pulled the plug, cancelling tuition subsidies for all foreign students. Suddenly, thousands of Malaysian families were hit with sky-high education costs. Some students were forced to drop out. Others returned home without their degrees. Dreams collapsed overnight. A brutal message from Britain's ruling class. Malaysia Airlines takes a hit. Next, Malaysia Airlines was targeted. Heathrow Airport, one of the world's most important aviation hubs, blocked Malaysia Airlines from expanding its landing rights. For Malaysia's national carrier, it was a financial blow. Fewer flights, less revenue, and restricted international growth. Mahathir strikes back, the birth of the Look East policy. But Mahathir Mohamad refused to back down. In 1982, he pivoted the nation's entire economic strategy, launching the Look East policy. Instead of relying on the West, Malaysia turned to the rising economic powerhouses of Japan and South Korea. And what happened next transformed Malaysia forever. Over 26,000 Malaysians were sent to Japan and Korea to study, train, and master industrial technologies. Japanese companies flooded into Malaysia, building car factories, electronics plants, and logistics hubs. Soon, instead of seeing continental European cars on Malaysian roads, Japanese brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan became household names. Thousands of new jobs were created as Japanese car makers set up manufacturing plants on Malaysian soil. Out of this transformation, Malaysia established its own national car brands: Proton, founded in 1983, Petronas, founded in 1993, both born directly from the Look East strategy, bringing homegrown car production to a country that had once imported almost everything. Meanwhile, Malaysia's oil and gas giant Petronas rose to become the world's leading exporter of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to Japan. And it wasn't just LNG. Malaysia's light, sweet crude oil, considered some of the finest on earth, became a top export to Japanese refineries, further strengthening economic ties. So while Britain tried to cripple Malaysia, Mahathir turned the retaliation into a launchpad for national progress. The Dawn Raid proved Malaysia could fight back. The Look East policy proved Malaysia could build forward, on its own terms, for its own future. Segment 6. How the Dawn Raid reshaped Malaysia's economy. In the hours after the Dawn Raid, Guthrie's shares were officially transferred to Malaysian control. For the first time in 160 years, 200,000 acres of Malaysian land, along with the millions in annual profits it generated, were no longer being siphoned off to Britain. Guthrie's headquarters was moved from London to Kuala Lumpur, transforming it from a symbol of colonial exploitation into a symbol of national ownership. But the impact didn't stop there. In the years that followed, Guthrie merged with Sime Darby, another major Malaysian conglomerate, creating one of the largest palm oil and plantation companies in the world. This merger cemented Malaysia's position as a global leader in agriculture, especially in the production of certified sustainable palm oil. Meanwhile, the success of the Dawn Raid boosted the national confidence to expand Petronas's global reach. Petronas didn't just stop at funding national takeovers, it grew into a Fortune 500 energy giant, and today stands as the world's largest LNG exporter to Japan, and a major player in the global oil and gas market. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Dawn Raid was what it did for Malaysia's identity. It proved to an entire generation that Malaysia was no longer just a player on someone else's chessboard. Malaysia had moved its own pieces, made its own rules, and won on the world stage. From reclaiming land and industries, to building global champions like Sime Darby and Petronas, to inspiring policies that turned Malaysia eastward, the Dawn Raid wasn't just a one-day headline. It was the start of Malaysia's economic awakening, and all of it began with 4 hours. That changed everything. Segment 7. Malaysia's Rise, from the Dawn Raid to global recognition. The Dawn Raid of 1981 was more than a financial coup. It was a national awakening. In the decades that followed, Malaysia kept building, and the world started noticing. In 1998, Malaysia proudly hosted the Commonwealth Games, right in Kuala Lumpur, the first Asian nation to ever do so. Towering above the city's skyline, the Petronas Twin Towers rose to become the tallest buildings in the world, a global symbol of Malaysia's ambition and progress. Kuala Lumpur International Airport, KLIA, became Southeast Asia's aviation hub, linking Malaysia to the rest of the world. The North-South Expressway, Plus, connected the entire peninsular Malaysia, boosting trade, mobility, and domestic growth. The Penang Bridge, one of Southeast Asia's longest, linked the island to the mainland, opening up new corridors of economic development. The creation of Putrajaya, Malaysia's futuristic administrative capital, showed the world that Malaysia wasn't just building buildings, it was building a vision for the future. Even the Formula One Sepang International Circuit put Malaysia on the global sports map, attracting millions of eyes from around the world. And perhaps the most poetic moment of all, in the years that followed, Queen Elizabeth II herself visited Kuala Lumpur, walking on the very same soil her empire had once controlled. She was later followed by her grandchildren, Prince William and Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, signaling a new era of mutual respect between Malaysia and the British royal family. Malaysia had come full circle. What started as a quiet 4-hour financial raid had evolved into a nationwide movement to own its future, to stand on its own, and to take its place on the world stage. And that is how Malaysia turned. The Dawn Raid into the dawn of a new Malaysia. Believe it or not, Malaysia has made world headlines once again. George Soros was creating chaos in Asia, which later turned into Asian financial crisis 1997. Do check out this video, and I will see you there.